Hey guys, imagine a story that isn't about battles or kings, but about stones, faith, and secrets buried for centuries. A story where a single place became the center of devotion, controversy, and decades of human tension. Nobody really knows exactly what happened first, who did what, or why, but that uncertainty is what makes this tale so gripping. This is Ayodhya. This is Babri Masjid. And as you listen, you'll slowly see how one site can shape history, identity, and memory for generations. So sit back, close your eyes, and let the quiet, complicated story of faith, law, and human ambition unfold. The story starts, predictably enough, a long time ago. In the year 1528, picture India under the reign of the Mughal Empire, with architecture booming, bazaars bustling, and everyone trying to outdo each other in building something impressive that could last centuries, or at least until the next emperor decided to construct something slightly bigger and fancier. Babri Masjid was commissioned, according to records, by Mir Baqi, a general under the Mughal Emperor Babur. Yes, that Babur, the same guy whose memoirs included both military campaigns and complaints about the food being served to him. Mir Baqi, being loyal and ambitious, built a mosque in Ayodhya, a town already ancient and historically layered. It was a relatively small structure, but with typical Mughal touches: domes, arches, delicate carvings, and a courtyard that invited quiet reflection, or at least was intended to. Now, architectural history is a bit like gossip. Different people see different things. Some historians point to the Babri Masjid as a clear example of Mughal artistry. Others note that the mosque might have incorporated older structures, local craftsmanship, even fragments of temples. Of course, this is where things get interesting, because every stone in Ayodhya seemed to come with a story, and not all stories agreed with each other. Speaking of stories, let's float gently over to one of the most persistent and controversial claims: the idea that this very spot was the birthplace of Lord Rama. For many Hindus, Ayodhya is sacred, and this site in particular is called Ram Janmabhoomi, the birthplace of the deity, who is the hero of the Ramayana. For Muslims, it was a mosque with centuries of history, prayer, and community gatherings. Two overlapping narratives, quietly simmering for centuries, until, well, they didn't remain quiet anymore. Fast forward a little, to the year 1949, India had gained independence. Just a couple of years prior, the constitution was fresh, and people were trying to figure out how to live together peacefully in this vast, diverse nation. But in December 1949, something curious happened. Ram idols suddenly appeared inside the mosque. Nobody knows exactly who placed them there, or why, and that's part of the ongoing historical intrigue. The idols themselves didn't shout or write notes, but their presence sparked debates, legal notices, and social unrest that would quietly grow for decades. This small act of placing some idols inside an old mosque turned a site of prayer into a site of controversy. Governments changed, local authorities hesitated, and communities found themselves in uneasy proximity. The mosque was locked, legal cases were filed, and the centuries-old calm of the place started to ripple with tension. And of course, lawyers found this excellent fodder for years of paperwork. Because why not? Let's pause for a moment and look at the mosque itself, not through political lenses, but through architectural eyes. It had 3 domes, the central one slightly larger, a courtyard that caught the sun in the mornings, and arches that framed the skyline of Ayodhya. It wasn't the Taj Mahal, no, but it had its own quiet dignity. Locals remember the echo of the adhan, the call to prayer, that once floated in the air, mingling with the scent of incense and the distant chatter of street vendors. These little human details often get lost in the headlines, but they remind us that, before all the disputes, this was a place where ordinary people lived and prayed. And that brings us to the legal battles that began quietly and then, inevitably, got louder. The 1949 incidents led to government lock-ins, a series of lawsuits, and a peculiar arrangement. The site was to remain undisturbed until courts decided the fate of the structure. Communities adapted, religious festivals cautiously continued, and historians scratched their heads, taking notes and occasionally sighing. So, by the 1970s and 1982, the Babri Masjid story was no longer just about stones and domes. It had become political, social, and symbolic. Politicians, religious groups, and historians all had opinions, and those opinions often collided like slow, awkward bumper cars. Campaigns were organized, rallies held, pamphlets distributed, and yet, in the background, waiting for a resolution that seemed elusive. This gentle, decades-long tension was about more than architecture or legal claims. It was about identity, memory, and faith. Imagine generations of people walking past the same walls, seeing them through different lenses, each convinced of their own truth. It's not a dramatic moment you can watch like a movie. It's slow, almost imperceptible sediment of disagreement building over time. Alright, friends. Let's drift gently back into Ayodhya. The 20th century had quietly built tension over decades, and by the early 1990s, that quiet was starting to feel less quiet. The year was 1992. Imagine February 6th in Ayodhya, a day that ordinary people would have remembered as just another hot Indian day, except that it became extraordinary and sadly infamous. On this day, a large group gathered at the Babri Masjid site. Slogans, speeches, and banners filled the air, and then, slowly, deliberately, the mosque was demolished. Yes, demolished. The three domes that had stood for nearly 450 years were reduced to rubble. Arches that had silently framed the sky now lay broken on the ground. The courtyard, once echoing with prayers, became a scene of chaos and dust. It was an act that triggered nationwide reactions, and the country seemed to hold its breath, though not for long. In the aftermath, riots broke out across India. Cities like Mumbai, Delhi, Ahmedabad, and countless others saw violence that was both tragic and exhausting to document. Hundreds lost their lives, thousands were injured, and communities that had coexisted, mostly peacefully, were suddenly engulfed in anger, fear, and uncertainty. Newspapers, television, and radio were filled with reports, but the human stories behind each statistic often went unnoticed. Families displaced, livelihoods disrupted, and a quiet sense of sorrow settled over towns and villages. Once the dust settled literally and figuratively, the legal machinery began its slow, careful, often tortuously slow work. Archaeologists were called in, notably the Archaeological Survey of India (ASI), to examine what lay beneath the mosque. Excavations revealed foundations, walls, and artifacts that suggested a structure existed there. Before the mosque, some argued it was a temple. Others cautioned that archaeology alone cannot settle questions of faith. The ASI report became a reference point for courts and politicians alike, and so began the long, multi-decade journey of legal disputes. In 2010, the Allahabad High Court delivered a verdict. It split the disputed land into three parts: one portion to the Sunni Waqf Board, one to a Hindu organization claiming the birthplace, and one to another Hindu group. It was an attempt at compromise, a legal middle path. Though middle paths rarely satisfy everyone. Some were pleased, others disappointed, and most historians probably sighed quietly. But legal battles in India are never that simple. Appeals were filed, arguments were made, and cases ascended to the Supreme Court. After nearly a decade, in November 2019, the Supreme Court delivered its verdict. The entire disputed land was awarded for the construction of a Ram temple, while an alternative plot was offered for a mosque elsewhere in Ayodhya. Following this, construction of the Ram temple began in earnest. The site transformed again, from contested ruins to an organized construction zone. Foundations were laid, stones were shaped, and cranes hummed softly under the winter sun. Pilgrims and visitors watched quietly, some with devotion, some with curiosity. For many Hindus, this was a moment of spiritual significance. For others, a reminder of decades of tension. Let's take a brief, slow look at some of the lesser-known facts about Babri Masjid and the site itself. Originally, the mosque had 3 domes and 5 arches. Its style was relatively modest compared to other Mughal monuments, yet elegant. For centuries, it had been a landmark in Ayodhya, not just for religion, but as part of local social life. Markets thrived nearby. Festivals were celebrated in its shadow. Children played in the courtyard before the site became a flashpoint. Even as dispute simmered, life continued around it. Politically, the Babri Masjid site became a potent symbol. Parties, organizations, and leaders often referred to it during campaigns. Its history was cited to mobilize voters, frame narratives, or justify actions. And while all this political noise swirled, the stones themselves remained quietly, patiently, witnessing human dramas unfold again and again. So, what can we learn if we float above the headlines and the debates? Babri Masjid is a reminder of the delicate balance between religious devotion, history, and law. It shows how a single site can embody centuries of faith, pride, and conflict. It demonstrates the need for tolerance, dialogue, and empathy, qualities that are often easier to discuss than to practice. Finally, if we step back and breathe, we can see the timeline of Babri Masjid like the pages of a slow, winding storybook. 1528, mosque built by Mir Baqi under Babur. 1949, ram idols placed inside, sparking legal disputes. 1992, mosque demolished. Nationwide riots follow. 2010, Allahabad High Court verdict divides land. 2019, Supreme Court awards land for Ram Temple. Alternative site offered for mosque. 2022 onward, Ram Temple construction progresses. Ayodhya continues to live with memory, faith, and history. And so, story gently closes, not with a dramatic flourish, but with a reminder that history often moves in slow, layered ways. The stones of Babri Masjid, once a quiet mosque, now live in memory, law, and devotion, teaching us that every place carries stories far beyond its walls. So, as you drift towards sleep, think of Ayodhya, a town shaped by faith, conflict, and centuries of human life. And remember, sometimes history isn't about spectacular battles or grandiose kings. It's about quiet tensions, delicate compromises, and the patience of stones.